Welcome to News in Depth. I'm your presenter, Effie Mpande. Now, the value of education towards facilitation of social and economic development is immeasurable. However, the education sector has enormous requirements for it to attain the required results. In today's edition of News in Depth, Pennipher Sikainda looks at funding currently being offered to the education sector and how this is affecting the country's literacy levels.
Many have said that the secret of success is not in how much one learns, but rather in never stopping learning.
Okay, we are looking at human rights violation 9. Yes.
Teaching and learning activities form an integral part in shaping society. Learners have their own responsibility to derive benefits from education services, whereas governments are expected to facilitate effective delivery of these services. In Zambia, much has been said about the quality of education. The education sector has had its fair share of problems over the last 50 years. Delivery of education services is one such challenge. Other challenges range from inadequate learning and reading materials, shortage of classroom space, imbalance of teacher-pupil ratio, and poor remuneration of teaching staff, among others. All these challenges seem to ask one question: is the funding adequate to this crucial sector?
We have time and again indicated that there isn't enough funding that is going to Ministry of Education. This is why possibly would even make mention that possibly it would be important for the President to consider even splitting Ministry of Education and that of Science Vocational Training, because you see it's like the ministry is too big. You are talking about a ministry which has about 87 to 90,000 teachers plus countrywide, and then you are also talking of Ministry of you are talking of Science Vocational Training, which also has a capacity of most of these trades training institutes and so on and so forth being brought together. So the ministry is just too vast.
In the 2014 budget presentation by Finance Minister Alexander Chikwanda, government aligned education priorities. They included revamping secondary and tertiary education. The minister made an allocation totaling 8.61 billion kwacha, which represented 20% of the entire budget for the sector. The budget allocation represented an increase of 53% when compared to the 2013 allocation.
Government will also construct an additional 150 primary school classrooms in the rural areas with corresponding 150 teacher houses by using the community mode method. So included in the education sector, infrastructure budget is 404.3 million kwacha for university and other tertiary infrastructure, in particular student hostels at the University of Zambia, Copper Belt and Mungoshi universities.
The 2014 budget reflected a 12% year-on-year increase in funding to the education sector. What does this mean for the teaching fraternity?
If you look at the breakdown of the allocation, you find that much of the funds go to emeritus, because education, of course, requires quite a substantial number of human resources. So much of the funding goes for emeritus, paying salaries, and what is left now for actual delivery of education, including infrastructure, is only so much, 30%, So we could see that, again, that amount is not enough. So we need to sort of expand that, if we really want to attain the desired goals of having a better educated society.
The long distances that pupils have to cover to access schools, especially in peri-urban and rural areas, is evidence that learning infrastructure is inadequate. Infrastructure is heavily dependent on substantial funding.
In the early years, as it were, many schools were built, were not enough. See, the important point to get is that as much as the country is growing, the more children are born, the more schools are supposed to be built. So that ratio of the increase in the population should be the challenge to how many schools we are building. So I think that's where the challenge is. As for now, what we'd like to say that years down the line, the infrastructure hasn't been so much as compared to the increase in population. Therefore, the problem of teacher-pupil ratio has come in, where I find that in certain places over-enrollment has come in, where I find one teacher is teaching 80 pupils, one teacher is teaching. This is where you can measure infrastructure problem. You may find that this community, the children have increased. Meanwhile, the same infrastructure which existed as way back as 1964 is still the same one. Maybe only one block has been built, if not anything. So you'll find that in the process, the only solution there is to increase the number of pupils in one class and one teacher teaching a lot of pupils.
Is there anything being done to address these infrastructure concerns?
This has been one key issue that the members of the general public have actually been crying for. And the ministry has embarked on an ambitious program to improve and upgrade the infrastructure in our education sector. So part of these non-personal emolument funds actually is earmarked for infrastructure and also the universities.
The long distance is only applied to primary school education. If you look at secondary school education, most of the secondary schools were boarding schools. And even now we are still building boarding schools. So that one is taken care of. But of course there are situations where parents cannot afford to pay boarding fees. In that case, government again has come in to come and upgrade certain primary schools. In populated areas, there are certain areas where we have a lot of people, like there are sub-centers. So the primary schools in those areas are being upgraded into day secondary schools, because you have a larger catchment area where pupils can come from their homes to school. So that one is being taken care of.
Emphasis on infrastructure is reflected in the 1.28 billion kwacha allocation of funds for the construction of secondary school infrastructure across the country in the 2014 budget. The ministry in charge of education affirms that secondary education infrastructure is currently being constructed.
1964, the government decided to build secondary schools in every district, at least one secondary school in every district. So whatever was called a district at the time of independence got a secondary school. If you look at the secondary schools actually in most of these districts, they look the same. You look at one secondary school in Kalabo, one in Mporokoso, one in Ruwingu, in Lundazi, they look the same. So it was one program that was done to try and bridge the gap for secondary education. Coming to the 80s, the government decided to put up more primary schools, if you like. And these are the ones that were turned into basic schools when we came into the 90s. So the government now decided to put up secondary schools. And if you look at the situation now, we have construction of secondary schools in most of the districts. In fact, every province has a share of the construction of secondary schools.
Additional funding has been provided for, among other things, operations and expansion of infrastructure in universities and colleges to the value of 404.3 million kwacha. Infrastructure needs go beyond classrooms. Teachers who provide the face-to-face services to learners across the country are victims of the existing infrastructure gap. The accommodation challenge is a huge concern for the teaching fraternity.
You know, we need to have a motivated teacher, that one who is going to do a lot for our teachers and help and contribute to the national development of this country. Suffice also to indicate that, you know, teachers have really done a lot in terms of the development of this country. As regards to today you are talking about having so many doctors, you are talking about having so many nurses, even new people from the media fraternity. You've passed through the hands of a teacher. So you can see that at least we are moving forward as teachers, but there is also a need possibly to bring on board even cooperating partners to help us in terms of building the infrastructure, even looking at issues of housing units of our teachers, and many more other aspects that affect our teachers as regards to their teaching.
Remember, in the rural areas, you can give a teacher housing allowance, but where will he find the house to pay? There it's about building a house. Because surely you can't expect them to rent those such houses. They also need, in our collective agreement, there's a described standard house which a teacher should find in the rural areas. So we need to build more houses. We need to work together with the honorable MPs so that development can be taken. I've talked about rural areas. In urban areas, the same. What we're talking about is that we have a challenge of accommodation. So I want to say the government should really begin to say, how many teachers are at Kamala Secondary School? Then how many out of this can we be able to build? If we can have a block of land and build houses for teachers, then we'll have to say, so that once the teachers completed their training, they can easily go to these schools, find accommodation, and in that way, they will deliver. Nowadays, we have a situation where a teacher stays in Munali, but is teaching at Matero. Now, can you imagine?
Government says such concerns are being given relevant attention.
Of course, we don't have enough accommodation. That is one thing that we are working on. You see, when we used to have donor-funded projects, the donors were emphasizing more on classroom space than accommodation for teachers. But now, the current government has changed the scenario. We are also looking at constructing houses for teachers. Although it will take a bit of time for us to cater for all the teachers that are there, especially in the rural areas. But it's something that we keep doing every year. We include teachers' housing in every year's budget.
It appears that most challenges hindering progress of the education sector are as a result of inadequate finances. This is more so that the ministry is the largest in the country. Beyond infrastructure, teaching staff equally depend on funding to ably provide teaching and learning services, while emoluments are a must-have. The labour movement feels that the service is no longer attractive, hence the few numbers getting into the profession.
The government has a lot of challenges to meet serving and retired teacher, so that at the end of the day, a child will be able to be happy to say. Nowadays, I think if you went into a school and say, out of you guys, how many of you wants to be a teacher? How many children will say, I want to be a teacher? They've forgotten where we're coming from. We want teaching to be attractive, as it was before. It's a profession we've told the world, we are proud to be teachers. We are really out there. And therefore, whatever we are saying here is that let the government recognize that out there a teacher does a great work. So when we are serving, the terms and conditions of service which we signed for, one would like to say they need to be implemented. Where there are distortions, where things are not correct, we correct them together. And where a teacher has got a problem, I think it's not to condemn them, it's to see really what is it that we can do. It's a high time in these 50 years to be able to look back and say, Zambia is what it is because out there, there's been a teacher.
In contrast to what our colleagues are saying, I can assure you that teaching is now become an attractive profession. We may have lost it at some time a few years ago, but currently I can rest assure you that teaching has become a profession that everyone would still want to join. In terms of funding, Pennipher, in the last 4 years, we have seen tremendous increase in terms of budget allocation to the education sector. From about 3.2 billion in 2010, 2014, we have a budgetary allocation to the sector that is standing at about 8.5 billion. This is a serious commitment that we have seen in the past years, because there is a realization that the education sector is very key in national development.
It appears that the challenge of inadequate funding to the education sector have had a negative effect on the country's literacy levels.
Talk about funding, you are talking about you need books, you need chalk, you need all these other requisites that are required for a pupil to learn properly. Now, if all these requisites are not put in place when funding is not adequate, definitely even the pupil in the class will be affected in terms of literacy. That's why you hear, no, there are a lot of pupils who may not read and write. It's as a result of not having adequate funding. That's why we have always implored upon government to respect certain protocols, such as the Dakar framework, and ensure that we move forward to attaining such levels of funding, so that once the levels of funding are improved in the education sector, in terms of the literacy levels and all these problems we've been talking about will be a thing of the past.
If you look at the average education attained by an adult above 25 years old, you find that the average is, for ladies, it's about 5 years of education. For men, it's about 7 years of education. So, meaning that on average, if you look at our society, somebody has only gone up to grade 7. So you can understand now the implication of that, you know. So even if they could read 1 or 2 words, but they might lack the necessary skills that they need in their day-to-day life. Yeah. So that has got a huge challenge on our society.
Basically, when you talk of literacy, you imply reading and writing, and teachers are the key players in this. They are the people who implement whatever policy that the government puts up in place in the Ministry of Education. So you find that there are a lot of reading programs that have come into schools, and a lot of other NGOs or organizations that try to promote the literacy. I would love to see more of organization coming up in partnership with the government to just promote literacy in the country.
Currently, what we are doing as a ministry is to open as many literacy centers, both in public schools, in these communities. This must be done, and we are always on the ground to ensure that we are encouraging our schools and these communities to open these literacy centers so that our people out there can access literacy education. I think we can also appreciate the kind of partnership that we have in relation to the issue of addressing adult literacy. We have partners from faith-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations that are actually collaborating with us to ensuring that issues of literacy are actually addressed.
For the Zambia Teachers Forum, their call is for government to pump in more money into new technology that will assist teachers effectively deliver services.
In the human resource aspect, we need to be a people that will continue to develop ourselves professionally, embracing the use of technology in our teaching and learning, because in the end, that's the ultimate goal. It is to enhance quality education in the country.
Some partners in the education sector have shared recommendations on other substantial reforms that need to be undertaken to improve the education sector further.
We need an educated society so that you are able to have a very good workforce. Yeah, so as it is now, with a labor force of probably 6 million, but the majority of whom are not educated, that is not good for society. So we need to work on that, we need to improve on that. And I think the effort that government has put in so far, in terms of just improving the education sector, are very commendable, and we just urge them to continue.
I would urge all teachers and educational establishment institutions to just embrace the use of technology. In that I mean, if schools in this Jubilee year we can think of migrating from the old ways of storing information to electronic, and also get to be more innovative in the use of ICT, become diverse, like schools setting up even a simple website where they can even store information about the school and all the other data. And also, with the website, there's so much that you can do. You can set up the students' portal, the parents' portal, and even the teachers. And we're moving with technology, so we need to embrace all these. So as we do this, you find that the ministry can be looking for certain information about a particular school. If they have set up their own website, the ministry can easily go to the website and get all the data that they are looking for in particular.
There cannot be no education without a teacher. Therefore, we are glad that in the past 2 years, there have been job evaluation and grading system where I think the salaries and conditions of the teachers have been evaluated, and I think there have been a lot of changes and a lot of improvement. But I think the challenges haven't ended there. There are a lot of distortions which need to be corrected. One again would like to say there's a lot of challenges which a teacher needs to be helped. Because even if we talk about a good salary, it means, as I've already said, it's not only about the salary. We need to have a situation where the home take pay, we're talking about a situation where a teacher can be able to say, when I retire, I think there are these reforms which are pension reforms coming. One also would like to say, even all these, they should come in the same line to say, when a teacher retires, or should also be able to retire happily. Be able to say, I was a teacher, and they don't become destitutes. So one would like to encourage that these reforms which are coming, funeral schemes, medical schemes, all these, if they could do, really come soon. Pension reforms, those which we believe can help our retired teachers settle down well, it will help us a lot.
The year 2015 will put Zambia's education sector under litmus test as the entire globe reviews performance of developing countries that could have attained the Millennium Development Goals and education for all targets.
That's all we had for you on the program. We were reviewing funding to the education sector. Please join us next week with another interesting episode. On behalf of my producer Pennipher Sikainda and cameraman Boyd Kafula, it's goodbye and God bless you.